All right, we are officially in Chapter 2, Lesson 7. Now we're not estimating the percent of a number anymore. We are actually going to find the percent of a number. So let's kind of refresh where we were last time in Lesson 6, and I'll show you where we're going in Lesson 7 with this real-world link. It says, snacks. In a survey, 200 students chose their favorite snacks. Use the table to find the number of students who chose each snack. Now let's just look at a few of these and then I'll talk to you about where we're going in this lesson. So what we have is the snack, the percent of kids that chose the snack. That written as a fraction is a rate per 100 because a percent is a rate per 100. And then writing an equivalent fraction because this is out of 200 students and we're trying to figure out of 200 students how many kids is 23%. So what happened here was if 23% of kids chose fruit, 23 out of 100 chose fruit. So when you double 23 to get the 200, how many out of 200? 23 doubled is 46. So 46 out of 200. You could do that with the cheese. 15% chose cheese. So technically 15 out of 100 chose cheese. If you double it, it would show you how many 2 out of 200 chose cheese. So 15 times 2 is 30. So 30 out of 200 chose cheese. Now, this is kind of where we left off in Lesson 6, but in Lesson 7, what we're going to try to figure out is, what if there weren't just a nice, beautiful number of exactly 200? If you don't have a multiple of 200 that you're trying to find the percent of, we're going to have to figure out what to do with that in this chapter. For example, what if there were 176 students? How do we find 23% of 176 students? We're going to have to get a different method. What if there were only 43 students? How do we find 23% of 43 students? So that's where we're headed in this lesson. Let's turn the page and see what we have in store for us. Okay, so this is page 148, and the heading here says find the percent of a number. So that's where we're going to find these two methods here, where one, you write the percent as a fraction, and then you are going to be multiplying, or you could write the percent as a decimal and then multiply. On the other page, 149, we're going to talk about, okay, can you still use those methods for percents greater than 100 and less than 1? So the answer is yes, but sometimes you have to use one method over the other. So let's dig in, see some examples, and learn about finding the percent of a number. All right. You can use fractions and decimals to find the percent of a number. To find the percent of a number, write the percent as a fraction with a denominator of 100, then multiply the fraction by the number. So this is going to be method 1. Method 1 is finding the percent by writing the percent as a fraction. And yes, we know that you have to have it out of 100, and then multiply the fraction by the number. The other method is going to be changing the percent to a decimal and then multiplying. That's going to be this method down here. So actually, let's write this in right now, and then we'll look at the example. Method 1 is write the percent as a fraction, then multiply. And method 2 is write the percent as a decimal, then multiply. So method 1, method 2. All right. So it says, for example number 1, refer to the circle graph. This is the circle graph. Suppose there are 300 students at York Middle School. Find the number of students that have cheese as a snack. So there are 300 kids, and it's saying 15% of those students have cheese as a snack. Now, this is interesting because they gave us a nice whole number, 300. So we could potentially use our methods from lesson 6, but we're going to try these new methods. So, write the percent as a fraction. 15% written as a fraction is 15 over 100, 15 hundredths. Now, if you simplify 15 hundredths by dividing by 5, So 15 divided by 5, 100 divided by 5, you get 3/20. Now the next step was to multiply. So what's 3/20 of 300? Because 300 is what we're trying to find the percent of. 15% of 300 is how many kids? So 3/20 of 300, this is where we have to multiply. Think of that of as multiplying. What's 3/20 times 300? Now, let's review a little bit of how to multiply with a fraction. There are a couple different ways that you might remember. Let's set them up over here. One way that you might remember is to set this up, 3/20 times 300 over 1. And then you can just multiply the numerators. 3 times 300 is 900. 20 times 1 is 20. And then you have to simplify. So 900 can be divided by 20. So we'll divide by 20, divide by 20. And 900 divided by 20, if you calculate that, is 45. So 45 over 1. That's 45. There's their answer. Now, you might remember multiplying fractions a little bit differently. So I'm going to show you the other method because this is actually the method that you'll probably see in this book. All right, this one's a little easier because you don't have to simplify in the end. Let's write this method over here. So you have 3/20 and you're trying to multiply by 300. So you set that up as 300 over 1. Okay, now what you do here is you think, how many times can 20 go into 300? That way I could make this a 1. And what did we say? Oh, we didn't say. 300 divided by 20, it can go in 15 times. So you can have the number 15 here. So we did our simplifying now. 3 times 15, 45. 1 times 1 is 1. So there's your answer again, 45. So when you go to multiply fractions, remember there are a couple ways to do it, whichever one's easy for you. You can either break the number down before you multiply or you can simplify it after you multiply. So method 1, write the percent as a fraction, then multiply. Let's look at method 2, write the percent as a decimal, then multiply. So think, 15%. How did we write 15% as a decimal? There were a couple ways to think about it. You could either think about it as 15 hundredths and then write 15 hundredths, or you could move the decimal. So remember how we did that, move the decimal? So 15% turned into a decimal is going to be a small fraction of a number. So we move the decimal 2 to the left. So if you think of 15 as a decimal, move it 1, 2 to the left, 2 places to the left. There's your 0.15. All right, so 15 hundredths, 0.15 of 300 is just like saying times 300. And when you put that in your calculator, 0.15 times 300, it gives you 45. So there it is. So you can think about on this side, which method do you like more? Do you like changing the percent as a fraction then multiplying? Or write the percent as a decimal and then multiplying? And for those of you that like to see a visual of this, it says use a bar diagram. This is like we did in the last chapter. Okay, 30 plus half times 30 equals 30 plus 15 or 45. Yikes. So you have 300. We're trying to find 15%. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 300 broken into 10 is 30, but we are looking for 15. So 10 and a half, that's your 15%. 30 plus 15 is 45. We're going to try this one together. Find the number of students at York Middle School that have chips as a snack. So we've got to look back up at here. Where's chips? 18%. So now we have 18%. So down here, essentially, we're trying to find 18% of 300 students. That's what we're trying to find, 18% of 300. Let's use method 1 first. So let's use the multiplying, or I'm sorry, the turn it into a fraction and then multiply. And then we'll do the turn it into a decimal and then multiply. So we're practicing both methods to see which one you prefer. So method 1. All right, here we go. Turn 18% into a fraction. So 18% is 18 over 100. All right, then let's simplify. Let's divide and simplify by 2. All right, 18 divided by 2 is 9. 100 divided by 2 is 50. So now we have this fraction. We're trying to find 18% of 300, or 9/50 of 300. And remember, you change that of to a multiply. So 9/50 times 300. So let's set this up. This is our setup right here. This is what we're trying to figure out. Now, you can multiply across 9 times 300, 50 times 1, and then simplify. Or you can break it down right here. How many times does 50 go into 300? 6. So you can change that to a 1 and this to a 6. 9 times 6 is 54. 1 and 1 is 1. So your answer here is 54 students. Now let's see if we get the same answer using method 2. So let's write out method 2. Now method 2, we had to change 18% to a decimal. So 18%, again, you can think of that as 1800ths and then write 1800ths. Or think about it as moving the decimal. 2 to the left, 1, 2. So that would be 0.18. All right, so 18% of 300 is like 0.18 times 300. So let's figure out what that is. 0.18 times 300, 54. So either way, you get the same answer of 54 students. All right, now, what we're going to do on the next page is the same thing. You'll be able to use both methods. However, there is a time when you have to use method 2, where you write the percent as a decimal and then multiply. So we're going to try to figure out when is that time that you have to use method 2. Other than that, you can use either method and it will work. All right, percents greater than 100 and less than 1. You may choose whether to write the percent as a fraction or a decimal based on the problem. And that's the key, based on the problem. So let's take a look at examples 2, 3, and 4. All right, example 2, let's see what they did. Find 145% of 320. So it looks like they're using the turn it into a fraction and then multiply method. So 145% is 145 over 100. You can simplify that. So if you simplify and divide by 5, it gives you 29/20. Think 145% of 320 is 145% times 320. So 29/20 times 320. So they did this little cross out method here. 20 went into 320 16 times. 29 times 16. See, because 1 times 1 is 1. That's where they get this 29 times 16. 29 times 16 is 464. So 145% of 320 equals 464. Now, let's see if the other method would work for this. You have 145%. If you turn that into a decimal, move this 2 to the left, you get 1.45. This times 320 equals what? 1.45 times 320, 464. So both methods would work. So when you have percents over 100, you should be able to use both methods. And they're going to show you that right here. So watch. Oh, actually, it looks like we're going to do the fraction first. All right, 220% is like saying 220 over 100. Let's simplify that. Let's divide by 20. All right, 220 divided by 20 is 11. 10 divided by 20 is 5. So you have 11/5. That's the 220%. Turned it to a fraction and simplified it. So 220% of 65 is like saying 11/5 times 65. All right. Now we've got to figure that out. So let's do what they did up here in this step. So let's set this up. 11 over 5 times 65 over 1. And let's divide both of these by 5. So you get a 1 there. 65 divided by 5 is 13. All right. Now we have to, 1 and 1 is going to be 1 in the denominator. So what's 11 times 65, or I'm sorry, 11 times 13. That's what we care about here. 11 times 13 is 143. So 220% of 65 is 143. Now, again, let's quickly look and see if we could have done, which we should be able to do, the other method. So if you have 220% and you move the decimal 2 to the left, that's going to give you the decimal of 2.20 or 2.2. 2.2 of 65 is 2.2 times 65. And what does that give us? 143. Bam. There you go. So you could use both methods if the percent is greater than 100. Let's see what happens when the percent is less than 1. Find 0.25% of 58. All right, now here's where you run into your problem. You can't set up and say the fraction over 100. That's where you run into the problem. That's why you have to use the method of turning the percent into a decimal. So let's see what they did. All right, as a decimal, 0.25% is 0.0025 because remember you have to move it 2 to the left. So 0.0025. So 0.25% of 58 is like saying the decimal times 58. So when you put that into the calculator, this times this is 0.145. So 0.25% of 58 is 0.145. So let's write this down. At the top, percents greater than 100, you can use both methods. Percents less than 100, you must change the percent to a decimal, then multiply. So you have to change it to a decimal for that one. All right, so let's look down here. Let's take a look using both methods. Which one can we do both methods with? 128%, 0.3%, 0.85. So listen, this is the only one with a percent greater than 100. These are less than 1. We have to use the decimal method with those, but this one we could turn into a fraction. So we'll try both methods with this one. These ones we have to use the decimal method. So method 1, the fraction method, let's try that. 128%, that's like saying 128 over 100. Okay, let's simplify that. They can both divide by 4. 128 divided by 4. 128 divided by 4. 32. All right, so we have 32. 100 divided by 4 is 25. Now, we have to find 32, we have to multiply 32 25ths times 550. 550. Now, let's break this down. How many times does 25 go into 550? 550 divided by 25, 22 times. So, 32 times 22 should give us our answer. 32 times 22, 704. Now, let's see if we can get the same answer using the decimal method. So, 128%. If we move the decimal 2 to the left, it should be 1.28 times 550. And we're hoping for 704. So 1.28 times 550, 704. Got it. So both methods worked on that one. B is 704. All right, now for these we have to use the decimal method. So let's take this one and write it up here. 0.3% equals what decimal? Take this out, move it to 0.003 times 200 equals, all right, so we have 0.003 times 200, 6/10, 0.6. All right, now let's try this one. Let's change this percent to a decimal, 0.85%. Take this out, move it over 2, so we get 0.0085 times 600. All right, let's see. 0.0085 times 600, 5.1. Now, let's think about how we could check these real quick. 0.3 out of 200, it's like taking, if it was 100, it would just be 0.3, 3/10. But since it's out of 200, it's double that. Double 3/10 is 6/10. Now look at this, 0.85. Out of 100, it would be 0.85, but we're talking out of 600. So what's 0.85 times 6? 5.1. See that? So this is like using our old method from the previous lesson, lesson 6, where we are estimating and thinking of the percent as a rate per 100, and it still works. So we've got these nice, when you've got these nice whole numbers, you can check it that way when you're finding a percent out of a number that's a multiple of 100. All right, now there's one more example on the next page, and then we get to our guided practice. So let's look at this last example. In a recent state Special Olympics meet, Franklin County sent a team of 70 players. 20% of the team competed in soccer. How many athletes competed in soccer? So 20%. What's 20% of 70? They're using the decimal method. 20% as a decimal, if you move it over 2, 1, 2, is 0.2. So what's 2/10 times 70? 14. 14 members were soccer players. So let's use the decimal method with this. In the same meet, 15% of the team from Delaware County competed in tennis. If there were 20 members on the team, how many competed in tennis? So what are we trying to figure out? What's 15% of 20? So let's use the decimal method. 15%, move the decimal 1, 2 to the left. So you have 0.15 times 20. All right, 0.15 times 20 is 3. So 3 members competed in tennis. Okay, that's it for the lesson. Now we're moving into the guided practice on page 150. All right, you guys, we are on the guided practice for lesson 7 on page 150. And we are going to do 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, let's see. You could use either method on these, except are there any where you're finding a percent that's less than 1? Looks like this one you're going to have to use the decimal method. And the other ones you can choose on. All right, some of you might be finding the decimal method to be way faster. I will show you both methods. So go ahead and do number 1, find 32% of 60. And then when you play the video again, I'll show you both methods, the fraction and then the decimal. All right, so if I was going to do the fraction method, I would say 32 out of 100. I would simplify that by dividing by 4. And that's going, 32 divided by 4 is 8. 100 divided by 4 is 25. Then I have to multiply by 60. Okay, now I can't break 60 and 25 down, like I can't divide 60 by 25, so I'm just going to multiply across. So the denominator 25 times 1. Now 8 times 60 I calculated as 480. And when I can't simplify this to, my answer is going to be a fraction for this. If I simplify it, if I put that in my calculator, 480 divided by 25, 480 divided by 25, that's going to give me this number 19.2, which is probably the number that you got using that decimal method. If I simplify and divide by 5, 480 divided by 5 is 96. 25 divided by 5 is 5. 96 divided by 5 is going to give you 19.22. And by that I mean 19.2. See, 96 divided by 5. So if you had the answer of 96 fifths or 19.2, that's the same number. Now let's just see if you did the other method. You would have said, so how do we show our work? 32%. You'd show how you moved the decimal and got 0.32 times 60. And then when you put that into the calculator, it's 19.2. All right, now in this number 2, since the percent is less than 1, you have to use the decimal method. So how do you show your work? Show the percent, show moving the decimal, and then give yourself that new number. Sorry, that got really crunched. So this number is 0.0055 times 220. Now that should have given you 0.0055 times 220, 1.21. So there's your answer for that one. Okay, 275% of 4. Wow. So you could do either method here. 275, set it up as a fraction. Simplify it. So let's divide by 25. 275 divided by 25 is 11. 100 divided by 25 is 4. And then we're multiplying by 4. Oh, look at those cancel each other out, so you end up with just 11 as your answer. Now, what if you did the other method? How do you show your work? 275. Show how you move the decimal. So that's 2.75 times 4. And when you put that in the calculator, it gets you your 11. All right, now this last one, number 4. Troy wants to buy a jersey of his favorite MLS team. The jersey is 30% off the original price. If the original price of the jersey is $35, what's the amount Troy will save? So what's 30% of $35? So 30% of 35. Well, if you move the decimal, that gives you 0.3 times 35. 0.3 times 35, 10.5. So that's what, $10.50. Now, if you did the setting it up as a fraction, then you would have to have 30% being 30 over 100. Simplify that, divide that by 10, and you've got 3/10. We're multiplying by 35. And here's another situation where you can't do that easy. 35 can't divide by 10 easy. Let's multiply across. So 3 times 35, that would be 105. 10 times 1. Then you have to simplify that. So if you divide by 5, 105 divided by 5, 21. 10 divided by 5 is 2. Now see, you can't write this as, you can't write this as your answer. So you have to think about how much money is that. So you think of how many times does 2 go into 21? And there's your 10.5. 2 goes into 20 10 times, and you have one half left over, which is half of $1.50. So that's why you can think of this as $10.50. If you put 21 divided by 2 in the calculator, it's going to give you 10.5, $10.50. So I think you're probably finding that decimal change the percent into a decimal method is easier, and it works for every single kind of problem here. If you really like the fractions, you can go ahead and keep doing it. You just can't do it for percents less than 1. So our next step is going to be independent practice. All right, lesson 7, independent practice. We're on page 151. These are the ones that I need you to circle. Number 1 and 2, number 6, 7, and 9. So read this real quick with me so you can figure out how these work. The cafeteria at Midtown Middle School surveyed 575 students about their favorite food. Find the number of students that responded for each of the following. So 8% of 575, 20% of 575. You could use either method for those. Find the percent of each number. Now we're not dealing with this 575 anymore. Now you're finding 0.46% of 80. So you have to use the decimal method. 350% of 96. And then down here in the story problem, the original price of a pair of shoes is $42. The sale price is 20% off the original. What's the amount of the original? So you're trying to find 20% of 42. Go ahead, stop the video, and do these on your own. All right, let's check our answers for the independent practice. For number 1, we're trying to find 8% of 575. If you change it into a decimal, 8% is 0.08. And if you calculate it times 575, you get 46. If you did the fraction method, 8 over 100 simplified is 2 over 25 times 575. Also, 2 times 23 is going to get you 46. All right, decimal method. If you change 20% to a decimal, move that over to the left, you get 0.2. 0.2 times 575 is 115. If you do the fraction method, 20 over 100 simplifies to 2/10. Multiply that by 575. You're going to end up getting, you have to go this way, 2 times 575, 10 times 1. But then when you divide and simplify 1,150 over 10, you end up with 115. Okay, number 6, you have to use the decimal method. The percent's less than 1. So 0.46%, move the decimal, it turns into 0.0046. That times 80, calculated, is 0.368. Make sure that you're showing your work. All right, this one, when you move the decimal, 350% turns into 3.5. 3.5 times 96 is 336. I didn't write that here. If you do the fraction method, 350 over 100 simplifies to 7 over 2. You multiply by 96, cross that off. 7 times 48 is 336. All right, the decimal method is probably best for this. It's just like that one in the guided practice. 20% becomes 0.2 times 42 is 8.4, which is $8.40. If you do the fraction method, 20 over 100 simplifies to 2/10. Multiply by 42 over 1. 2 times 42 is 84. 10 times 1 is 10. 10 goes into 84 8 times, but there are 4/10 left over, which is 40 cents. Okay, next step, we're going to go into the reflection for lesson 7. Okay, so for the lesson 7 reflection learning objective G, I can find the percent of a number. Remember, there are 2 ways to find the percent of a number. You can write the percent as a fraction and then multiply, or write the percent as a decimal and then multiply, and you move that decimal 2 to the left. But when you have a percent less than 1, you must do the change the percent to a decimal method, then multiply. So you're going to need those for your reflection. Number 1, to find the percent of a number, I can either turn the percent to a fraction and then the fraction by the number, or I can turn the percent into a decimal by moving the decimal places to the, and then the decimal by the number. Now then you have to say which method you prefer. The method I prefer is to change the percent to a what? A fraction or a decimal? Now using that method, show your work for these two. 26% of 40, 275% of 60. For number 3, when the percent is less than 1, you must change the method, or you must use the method of changing the percent to a what? A fraction or a decimal. And then do that method here, 0.44% of 55. Show your work. Then do the learning objective check-in, and you are done with lesson 7. Only one more to go in this chapter.